cheap stuff is getting good. Another way to put that is there's a lot of really inexpensive filmmaking gear that's worth getting. And I wanted to find out if this SmallRig's new modular matte box system is worth it. I also wanted to find out how useful a matte box system is for a one-man band. What's up? I'm Nick Friend, and like I said, this is SmallRig's new modular matte box system. And the reason they call this a modular system is because each individual section of the matte box can actually be separated from the stages in front of it. Normally, a matte box has an entire self-contained system where you drop trays in. And they usually have anywhere between 1 and 4 different sections where you can drop trays in to add filters such as ND or diffusion. Now, this system actually makes using a matte box a little bit easier because they add these stages in a way where you can actually remove them entirely from the matte box system. They have these little quick release handles on the side, and what that allows for you to do is actually remove each system from the matte box in a section by section way. So for instance, this one matte box system has this base tray which actually clamps onto your lens, which they have a bunch of donuts for that allow for you to custom fit it to each lens that you have. And you take this and you have a tray system, and you can have an infinite amount of tray systems because of the way that this system is made. And you simply line up the base hooks and then press them in to these little quick release things, and that locks it in completely. Now this is one system, that's not going to come apart. And then that gets added on to the eyebrow, which is the actual matte box of the whole system, and that clips in just like that. And just like that, I built out a 3-stage matte box for my camera system. The reason you would want to do that is because when you're switching from one camera setup to another, it takes a lot of time to swap out various different apparatuses. And say, for instance, you're going from a tripod to a gimbal, you don't want to have to remove everything because you want to have the same overall aesthetic that you would get with using a matte box system, i.e. having the right filter on the lens. What this allows you to do is actually keep those filters on your system without having the entire matte box array hooked onto the front of the lens. Case in point, if you remove this tray and you just have this on there, this is much more manageable in terms of space and weight than all of this put together. Now, in terms of actual matte boxes and the usability and functionality of them all, this is, I would say, pretty middle of the road. It's made mostly out of metal with some pieces that are made out of plastic. That helps with weight saving, but it does come into question a little bit of the build quality. The basic kit comes with one single tray that clamps to the lens, as well as the actual matte box itself. I went ahead and added an extra set of trays that I can hook on to the front of the system, giving me a more conventional setup of 3 4x5.65 trays, which brings me on to the major selling point of this setup. Now, modular matte boxes like this aren't actually a new product. Namely, Polar Pro has a system where you can simply clamp on additional trays for the filters that come with that system. The reason that I would suggest this one over the Polar Pro option is because this one uses non-proprietary filter sizes. By that I mean it uses 4x5.65 filters, which are industry standard size, unlike Polar Pro, which uses proprietary filters that you can only use inside of their matte box system. So in terms of usability and flexibility, this has it beat. The other reason I would choose this over the Polar Pro system is that this is significantly less expensive than the Polar Pro ecosystem altogether. For systems like this, you generally want to start with a basic setup like one tray and the matte box, and then add as you need it for your specific setup. For me, that includes 3 trays because I wanted the ability to add a variable ND into this matte box, which I also got from SmallRig. And this is the variable ND that works with the modular matte box system. Now, because it's a variable ND, it's a bit thicker, and this is why I bought the 3-tray system rather than just the single tray system. It takes up 2 tray locations. So in order to make space for the variable ND, I can remove the front 2 trays, and then I just put the variable ND where those trays came from. And it locks in place exactly like anything else. And then you simply add the matte box directly to the front, and now I have a matte box with a 95mm variable ND fit to the front. This matte box comes with a standard 114mm opening where you can clamp the matte box onto the front of most cinema lenses, as well as it coming with donuts to adapt your photo lenses to match that standardized size. In terms of being a great piece of gear to get, I would say yes, it's definitely worth it. The reason I would suggest getting this is because it allows for you to do everything that you would do with a conventional matte box at a lower price point and with greater modularity. But the bigger question still remains. Is the matte box worth it for indie level run and gun one-man band filmmakers? So I wanted to test the actual functionality of a matte box in a few various different scenarios that I typically find myself in as a freelancer. The first setup that I went with was outside, as bright as it can get, with no clouds in the sky, and I wanted to see the difference that I could get with and without the matte box. So I went downtown and shot a few test shots. I used a 24mm f1.4 and an 85mm f1.4 prime lens from Sigma on a Canon C70 shooting in RAW. And to be honest, the results that I got between having a matte box on the lens and not having a matte box on the lens was negligible at best in this scenario. I didn't really notice a big difference between the two images. So after that test, I decided to increase the complexity of the scenario that I was shooting in, and I actually added something that kind of operates as a backlight. All right, so I know this frame looks a little crazy, but that's because the matte box is actually already on the camera. So I want to show you the setup that we're doing to test how this matte box handles flares. Tripod is set up right here. I'm not moving it. I'm going to be sitting over there with a light just outside of frame, so it'd be like kind of like cutting it out like that. So you can really see the difference between what it means to use a matte box and what it means to not use a matte box. So let's check it out. Now during this test, I noticed that there was a significant bump in clarity of the image when I had the matte box on versus when I had the matte box off. And this really shows why you would want to use a matte box system, because it does allow for a significant amount of control over your image with minimal setup and minimal input from both a lighting and a camera operating standpoint. So if you do find yourself doing a lot of backlighting or shooting in a lot of high contrast scenarios, I do recommend getting a matte box, and specifically I recommend getting one of these because of its affordable price point, modularity, build quality, usability, and overall ergonomics. It's just a very easy system to use. If you like videos like this, go ahead and subscribe. I make them as often as I can. Thanks for watching. Peace.